We've talked a lot about how the sentences provided in each lesson, like the examples, are not conjugated, and technically you wouldn't say them that way, although some of them might be correct. And you've seen that there are audios of the actual conjugated sentences, but we have no idea why or how these conjugations occur. Well, starting today and next lesson as well, and some more in different lessons. But generally, lesson 5 and lesson 6 will be talking about conjugation. Now, conjugation can be easy and it can be difficult. It kind of depends on how the person studies it. So hopefully I'll make things a little bit more clear. And yeah, let's get right into it. So vocab, and then I think it's like 30-ish words. I said I would point out some important ones. 형, 오빠, knowing the difference, like you won't, oops, I did not mean to do that. You won't know the actual difference between 형 and 오빠 unless you actually like read what he says in the notes. But I'm sure you've heard this kind of stuff in Korean dramas and stuff like that. But it's good to know the difference. Because it would be very weird if I were to call another male 오빠. Yeah, that, let's just say I wouldn't do that on purpose. I remember I called a older woman before, like one of my friends, I called her 언니 instead of 누나, and it was very embarrassing, and everyone had a good chuckle. I was with a bunch of Koreans, but it was quite embarrassing. Alright, enough embarrassing stories. How to say I or me in Korean. First, I want to point out the difference between I have to go slowly. I forgot about that. First of all, I want to point out the difference between I and me in English. This is something that I never knew/realized until I started to learn Korean, as you will find that learning a foreign language will vastly increase your understanding of your mother tongue and languages in general, which is very, very true. In English, I and me have the same meaning, but they differ in their usage. When the speaker is the subject of a sentence, I is used. When the speaker is the object, or other part, of a subject, me is used. So, for example, I love you, I is the subject, so I use I. You love me, now I'm the object, so you would use me. Makes sense. In Korean, the same word is used to say I or me. That is, there's no difference in the Korean word if it's the subject or object. Same like 우리. 우리 means we, or our, or us, but it's just one translation. 우리. It doesn't matter where you put it in the sentence, it's the same exact translation. Or it's the same word in Korean, which is very useful. In Korean, the same word is used to say I or me. That is, there's no difference in the Korean word if it's a subject or object. However, remember that different particles will be attached to these words. Although the word in Korean for I or me doesn't change based on its usage, it does change, or based on where it is in the sentence, it does change based on the politeness of a sentence. I think we start getting introduced to politeness levels here or next lesson, but I think it's I think it's in next lesson. But just keep that in mind that there are politeness levels, and we'll kind of discuss exactly when you'd use which. And my recommendation is just to learn the one that you're going to use the most often, and then you can start branching out and learning other politeness levels. It's not too hard to jump from one to the other. It's just kind of habit. Before I went to Korea, like even with my friends that I don't speak like a higher level of formality, I just spoke in the most common level, even though, I mean, they were very helpful. They were like, sure, we'll speak that way to you as well so that you can get practice with it, so that I don't go to Korea and say 나는 or 너는, which would be not very nice, to say the least. So 저 means I, and it's used in formal situations, while 나 is used in informal situations. I'll go into more detail about the difference between formal and informal, like when exactly is it formal, when exactly is it informal. But just FYI, you're almost always going to be using the formal I, so 저. Very rarely are you going to be using the informal situation, or not very rarely, in less situations. You could always be with a friend and use 나, but in more situations, 저 is what you want to use, especially if you never met someone before. 는 can be attached to 저 or 나 to indicate I is the subject of the sentence. So for example, 저는 or 나는. I am purposefully not providing example sentences because you still haven't learned proper conjugation. You will finally learn, about conjugation in this lesson. well, conjugation, but not formalities, I think. 를 can be attached to 초 or 나, same way. When it's the object, 초를, 나를. Sometimes you can even see it shortened. He talks about that, I think, in like less than 100 or something. But you're going to see this very often. Instead of 초는, you'll be seeing 촌, or 난, or 촐, or 날. Actually, do I say 촐? I don't know. I don't write it, but it might be used. But that's just good for you to know. Purposely not providing examples. 가. Alright, 가 can be attached to 초 and 나 to indicate I is the subject of a sentence or clause. I have briefly distinguished the difference between 이, 가, and 는 in lesson 2. He's going to go into a lot more differences in lesson 17 and lesson 22, but this isn't immediately important to you right now. Honestly, it's not important right now. What is immediately important to you is to remember that ka is attached to when ka, like from i or ka, is attached to na, it becomes de, and 초, the formal version, becomes che. So 대가 and 제가. Again, he's not putting any examples for reasons. In the lesson below, all of the sentences all of the sentences are conjugated in an informal style. Therefore, all of the examples below use the informal 나 or 네. In this lesson, don't worry about formalities, just focus on the information that he presents. Honestly, you shouldn't worry about formalities right now. Next lesson, you'll learn more about formal and informal speech, and you'll see 초 and 체 being used. Okay, now how do you say you? This is a long section, as you can see. There's six different points. It's important because at first I would really want to say you somehow. And I first, like, from a translator learned, oh, you is 당신, like here. And then no one ever corrected me, and later on I realized, like, I shouldn't be used. Actually, that's so funny. Most people that say 당신 are foreigners and only do so because they're trying to say, that's exactly me, when I was learning. But yeah, you probably almost always want to avoid this word until you finally realize when to use it. You're going to find a lot of alternatives to saying you, and you're going to figure out ways to just, sometimes you don't have to say it. So, what does he have to say about this? You've noticed I still haven't taught you one of the most common words in English language. I know it sounds weird, but the word you is not used very often. People get around saying the word you through a number of ways. Most of the time, you use somebody, usually a job position, when referring to them or talking about them. For example, you wouldn't say boss like, oh, did you do this? You would just say 부장님이 했어요? Like, did boss do this? Did principal do this? You would use their title. Vice principal, the name of your teacher, like Cloud 선생님, the customer, 고객님, 손님, like, just things like that. You would use, like, the title. You get the point. You don't have to know these words right now. Now, when you're talking to, like, friends or family members, it's English. It is often used. You often will use, like, a title, like older brother or younger sister, or not younger sister, but older brother, older sister. So you would use, that's why you hear a lot of times, like, 오빠, meaning older brother, when a woman is calling someone who, like a male who's older than her, or her actual older brother. So yeah, but even if somebody is not your older brother, you can call him 오빠 if you're closer to him. Obviously, if you're female. So yeah, you just use, like, that kind of title. It's kind of like if you know any Japanese or you're watching an anime, like senpai, you would hear that used instead of the name. So instead of saying, like, you, like, did you do this? Like, did senpai do this? Kind of like that. I'm not too sure. My Japanese is very shabby. It's not that good. I always end up just saying Korean words when I'm trying to speak Japanese. So yeah, you can usually call any woman or man that looks very old, like grandmother or grandfather. You can call them 할머니 or 할아버지, which, yeah, all the time. But other than that, you don't really call somebody part of your family unless you're close with that person. You can generally call any strange man or woman that you don't know 아저씨 or 아주머니. So like when you're on the bus, you would probably just call him 아저씨. Which is obviously not his name. In informal situations, you can use 너, like 너는, 너를. and then diga. I know it looks like dega, but it's pronounced diga. The reason for that is if you look at this guy right here, this is pronounced dega, which is I. This means you, and it would also be pronounced dega if we read it the way it's written. But to differentiate between I and you, this is read as diga. Ni, ka, haha. Alright, and then finally dangshin, which is, yeah, just don't use that, honestly. We'll talk about it way later, I think, but just don't use it. You may hear it in Korean dramas, but again, just to be safe, don't use it. Basic conjugations. Alright, every sentence we've learned has not been conjugated. All the sentence, so far I would never actually, all the sentences so far would never actually be used in Korean because they're not conjugated. I felt you needed to know the basic sentence structure before you learned how to conjugate. The good news is, conjugating in Korean is much easier than other languages, especially English and French. True? I don't know. Definitely easier than English. I don't know any French, but off the top of my head, I don't know if, like, from very limited kind of like surface knowledge of a bunch of languages, I don't know if I would say Korean is the easiest. Let's just go with what he says. I don't really have an opinion. I don't have enough information. An important note before you begin. Okay, this lesson will show you how to conjugate past, present, future verbs in the most basic way. Although all of these conjugations are grammatically correct, they're rarely used in conversation. Okay, what's going on? We learned how to conjugate and we still can't use them in conversation? Well, Korean conjugation has like a basis, and then you can kind of insert like formalities and things like that. So right now we're using the diary form, which, he says that this form is called the diary form because it's when you're writing in your diary, writing to yourself. It's also writing some tests or books, not in dialogue, research papers, all that stuff. That's why it's called like the plain form or the diary form. You wouldn't use it when speaking necessarily, but it's the basis for everything else. So once we learn this, we can immediately learn, or in next lesson, we can learn how to say things in speech. The difference is very small. I don't think it's much of an issue. I kind of like the way he presents it. At first, I didn't like it. I think I said this before. I did not like the way he presented the information and the order. I thought conjugation should have come much sooner. But then after learning it, I was like, wow, this is like very, very concise, very clear, very like step-by-step process. Whereas when I learned conjugation, like literally the second thing I learned, I realized it was very, very confusing. I realized that having more words that I can conjugate is helpful, and having more basic knowledge of Korean sentence structure was actually useful. So, if you don't like it, at least give it a shot. If you used this form in a sentence, you should use the informal na, as this conjugation is seen as informal. As such, throughout this lesson, you will see da used for I. However, as I mentioned, this conjugation form is also used in print, like books, newspaper, articles, etc. When this is done, the sentence is either formal or informal, as it's just relaying facts. When used like this, no specific person is the speaker, and nobody is getting directly spoken to. Therefore, you don't generally see cho or da in these forms of Korean, and there is no need to see these writings as formal or informal. It is possible to use this diary or plain form in conversation, true, but you're more likely to hear one of the conjugations discussed in the next lesson. Although the plain... Actually, when I first got introduced to this, I was like, whoa, what? Like, especially in text messaging, I was like, wait, they didn't even conjugate it. What's going on? I don't remember when I realized that they do this, but just from input, like listening to a lot of stuff, I realized, okay, there are certain situations where you would just leave it in the diary form and you would actually say it or text it. I'm not going to go over that right now because we got a long lesson ahead of us. Although the plain form is not very common in conversation, the conjugation itself is incredibly important. Very, very true. If you want to understand more complex grammar or to learn to read more printed form of Korean, like books and newspaper. I never had problems with that, honestly, even though they use the plain form. It was, I don't know, as long as you learn the plain form and then you learn like the forms that come after it, going back to the plain form is very simple, in my opinion. You will, or at least in my experience, you will learn the most important conjugations for conversation in the next lesson, but I highly recommend you to learn the conjugations presented in this lesson first. I agree. Also, the only part of speech that gets conjugated in Korean is verbs, adjectives, and the exception, which is ida. As you already know, a sentence must end in either a verb, adjective, or ida. Let's look at how to conjugate verbs and adjectives into the past, present, and future. Okay, present tense. So now we're only talking about verbs, not adjectives, and you'll see why later. So if you learn how to conjugate verbs, conjugating adjectives is like really easy. Conjugating verbs is also easy. So present tense, it's really easy. You get the stem of the word, and I think we talked about this before. It's just the word without the ta. So 먹다, you get rid of the ta, and you grab the 먹, that's the stem. So 먹, and then you add 는다. So it becomes 먹는다. 닫다 becomes 닫는다. So 나는 문을 닫는다. I close the door. 나는 밥을 먹는다. I eat rice. It looks like you just added basically a 는 in the middle of the word. But like, if it's, what's it called? Yeah, that's if it ends in a consonant. Now if it ends in a vowel, you're going to add 니은, 타. So 배운다, 이해한다, to understand. 간다. You probably heard this a lot. 간다, 나 간다. So yeah, that's just how you conjugate. It's very simple. You're just attaching something to it. So 나는 친구를 만난다. 나는 그것을 이해한다. 나는 한국어를 배운다. 나는 집에 간다. So that's the present tense. Now the past tense, before we learn this, you need to know something important. Korean grammar is based on adding things directly to verbs or adjectives to create specific meanings. You're going to be doing a lot of this. For example, earlier in the lesson, you saw how 는타 or 니은타 can be added to the stem of a verb in order to conjugate the verb to the present tense. Hundreds of grammatical principles, not just conjugations, but grammatical principles that actually have meaning in sentences, are created by adding certain things to the stem of verbs and adjectives. To summarize what he's saying is, sometimes we won't be adding 니은타 or 는다, sometimes we'll be adding ki or 서, or she or 세요, like 가세요. I'm sure you've heard that. Like 하자, like 먹으러 가자. I'm sure you've heard that too. Actually, I'm not going to assume what you guys have heard or not heard. Maybe this is your first time like into Korean and you don't like watching Korean stuff. So basically, the whole form of getting the stem of the verb is really important because one, you can conjugate it, or you can conjugate it differently by adding like grammatical principles. So that's basically what he's trying to say. The list does go on and on and on. Notice that some of these grammatical principles require a or o. Many grammatical principles or conjugations or any other things require the addition of a, o, which you'll see here, a, o, and then ya, hada. Here, a, o, and then 서. Can I think of one? Regular conjugation requires that as well. What else requires that? I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Notice that the slash indicates that you choose. Yeah, so you're choosing one or the other. Kind of like how we had the slash between e and ka and 는 and n. It's one or the other. You don't add both. I've seen people add both. It's one or the other. So some cases you'll be adding a, some cases you'll be adding o. The following rule. So this is how you determine. Basically, the way I remember it is if the last vowel in a stem ends in this guy, a or o, right? Including the rare cases of the last vowel being ya or yo. Actually, I don't know of a single word stem that ends with yo. I probably do, but I can't think of one on top of my head. Anyways, back to the rule. If it ends in one of these two guys, you're going to add a, right? So you're going to add a. And if it ends in anything else, in anything else, I got excited, you're going to add o. So that's what he says here. Now there's an exception to that. If the only exception is ha, so like 이해하다, you've seen a lot of words that like 독하다, 뚱뚱하다, 좋아하다, those words, all of them that end in hada, is including the verb hada, you actually add yo to it instead of a or o. Don't worry about what I just said. This is going to make it a bit more clear. Alright, now we're talking about the past tense. So the past tense, remember in the present tense we added 는타 or 니은타. In the past tense, it's all the same. You're either going to add, well, it's not all the same, but you're either going to add atta or otta. Now remember, you learned how to add, which one to use, like a or o. So again, atta for the past would be used if the last vowel is one of these two. Otherwise, you're going to use otta, except in this exception where hada exists, you're going to use yotta. So yeah, let's look at some examples. So 나는 밥을 먹다. I eat rice. This is unconjugated and it's in the present tense. Now, if I wanted to conjugate it in the present tense, it would be 나는 밥을 먹는다. And if I wanted to take it to the past tense, I would say 나는 밥을 먹었다. I need to remember to go slowly. Alright, now same sentence, or next sentence. 나는 문을 닫다. I close the door. Present unconjugated. Now let's take it present conjugated. 나는 문을 닫는다. And then finally, if in the past tense, it would be 나는 문을 닫았다. Now, 나는 창문을 열다. In the past tense would be 나는 창문을 열었다. And then finally we have 나는 한국어를 공부하다. It would become 나는 한국어를 공부하였다. Alright, what makes this complicated at first is that for verbs that have a last syllable that end in a vowel, so like including 하다 and 가다 and 보다 and all that other good stuff, the atta or otta get merged. So this can sometimes be complicated, but I wouldn't worry about it too much because when you try to pronounce it, it kind of makes sense. They get merged. So for example, ka, kada, right? We take the stem, we get ka, and then we add atta to it. But then it would just be ka atta. They're both like a, right? So they both end in a, so you can just combine those two a, so it becomes katta. Oda, if you take the stem of oda, which means to come, and you add atta to it, it becomes watta. You kind of just stick them next to each other. O and a together becomes wa. So watta. U and o becomes wo. So like 배우다. When you add otta to it, it becomes 배웠다. 배웠다. E and o, this one doesn't, like these next couple, like this one, and I think this one, don't, actually this one kind of makes sense. But this one is a bit strange, where E and o become yo for some reason. So like 끼다, putting on like mask, right? I don't know if we learned this word or not, but regardless, 끼다, when you add otta to it, it becomes 꼈다. So you have that. Now, o and o, just like a and a, you just squish them together. It becomes naso, plus otta becomes nasotta. So you kind of just get rid of one of them, one of the o's. Yo and o just remains yo, because, I mean, you're not going to add a third stroke. That wouldn't be a vowel. So, kyoda plus otta becomes kyotta. And then finally, hada, or ha plus yo becomes he. This one you're going to see it all the time. So I wouldn't worry about memorizing it, because you're just going to see it all the time that you can't possibly get this wrong. So like 공부하다 plus 였다 becomes 공부했다. Here, it would be 공부했다. But like he says here, it can be written as he. It can also, like in official documents, or sometimes you'll see it in like some stories. If you're looking for stories, like children's stories to kind of learn from, you'll see it sometimes where it's 하요 instead of he. And you can see it in a street sign that he has. But same thing. Now, finally, words like 쓰다 that end in or like 잠그다. Oh, he doesn't even discuss in this lesson. Oh, because actually it's kind of complicated. He is right. I kind of forgot about all the different situations. But many people have asked me, how do I merge a, o to complex things like u, ya, and e? You will find that the stem of all these verbs and adjectives do not end in these complex vowels. Yeah, like I can't think of anything off the top of my head that would end in like this guy or this guy, honestly. This guy, yeah, a I can see, like I have no idea actually. Oh, beda. Yeah. Carry on your shoulder. Okay. So yeah, pareda, meda, beda, the other e. With these words, the same rule applies as above. That is, the final vowel does not end in a or o, so you would add o. You'd really have to be looking at what I'm saying, because all these random vowels are going to get you confused. But I would say take your time on it, learn one at a time, learn past, present, then learn past, then learn future. Future is going to be super easy. We're just going to fly through it, honestly. So he gives you examples. Pare plus otta becomes paretta, metta, or meotta, I guess. It is irrelevant if you merge them or not. I would write it this way, but again, I'm not even Korean, so just take my opinion with a grain of salt. Now, he goes into more details. Kada becomes katta for the same reason we talked about. Oda becomes watta because you can kind of combine the a and o, put them next to each other, and becomes wa. So 삼촌은 가게에 왔다. My uncle came to the store. 배우다, remember, if you add ot다, and then the o and u kind of join next to each other and become wo, so 배웠다. So, where is it? 오빠는 영어를 배웠다. My older brother learned Korean. 던지다, so it would become 나는 공을 던졌다. Almost conjugated it by accident. 건너다, again, o and o just kind of combine together and become o. They don't really change anything. 나는 길을 건넜다. 만나다, same thing. a and a. Just you get rid of one of them. 나는 친구를 만났다. And then 공부하다 is the exception where ha and yo become he, and you're going to hear that all the time. And I repeat, you don't have to worry about it because you're going to see it so many times that it's impossible for you not to learn it. 나는 한국어를 공부했다. Now the future tense is simple. You just add 겠다 to any stem. Easy. Done. So 먹다 becomes 먹겠다. 가다 becomes 가겠다. 배우다 becomes 배우겠다. You're done. Easy. Two verbs specifically that are often conjugated in the future tense without actually having a meaning in the future tense is 알다, like 알겠다, and 모르다, like 모르겠다, which is used a lot. Both of them are. I don't want to make any example sentences because they would be too complicated at this point, but it would be good to remember that the word 알다 and 모르다 are often conjugated to 알겠다 and 모르겠다. Although they are conjugated to the future tense, these two words are typically used to express that somebody knows or doesn't know something in the present tense. Yeah, so like if someone asks me like, oh, how do you do this? I could say 모르겠다, like, I'm not sure, I don't know. I'm not saying like I won't know, it actually means the present tense. And then the ending might change a little bit. It won't be like 모르겠다, it might be like, oh, 모르겠어요. Which is just adding something to the end. But that's for next lesson. So here's a good summary where he goes over like a bunch of verbs, different examples with different like ending vowels and getting the stem and then conjugate it to present, past, and future. I'm going to go over maybe a couple of them. So 먹다, the stem is 먹, and then it becomes 먹었다, 먹는다 in the present, and in the future 먹겠다, and then maybe 오다. The stem is o, present tense or past tense, 왔다, present tense, 온다, and then future tense, 오겠다. Alright, adjectives. Adjectives, so you learned previously that you needed to add nian or 는다 to a verb stem in order to conjugate it into the present tense. Well, for conjugating adjectives, for adjectives in the present tense, I can't speak for some reason. I keep wanting to switch to Korean. Just leave the adjective as it is. It's already conjugated. Adjectives are really easy to conjugate in the present tense. It's literally just leave them the way they are. 길다 becomes 길다. 크다 becomes 크다. 아름답다 becomes 아름답다. So you don't have to change anything. 그 선생님은 아름답다. Thank you very much. That teacher is beautiful. 그 길은 길다. That street is long. 나의 손은 크다. My hand is big. The past tense. The past tense works exactly the same way. verbs do. So adjectives and verbs in the past tense, exactly the same way. So 길다 becomes 길었다, 맛있다 becomes 맛있었다, 좋다 becomes 좋았다, 오래 되다 becomes 오래 되었다. Let's see, what else does he say here? He talks about the meaning of 오래 되다. It's not old in a bad negative sense, rather it's indicating that something has existed for a long time and now it is old. A more appropriate way to indicate that something is old and decrepit is to use the word nakta, not to be confused with nakta, which refers to an old person. I never confuse them, but I think I'm start confusing them now. This is a little bit complicated for you now, but although otta is attached to 되다 to make, or 돼 to make 되었다, this can be contracted, which is true. Teaching this is not the focus. You're going to see this in lesson 9 and 14. Okay. Also, while 되다 is commonly used and conjugated as a verb, in this case, 오래 되다 is an adjective, kind of like how 하다 can be a verb, but then sometimes in an adjective, it can be located in an adjective. I think, yeah, it can. So just be careful whether you're conjugating an adjective or a verb. For example, 우리는 오래된 집에 갔다. We went to the old house. So yeah, he's using it as an adjective to modify the house, rather than actually conjugating it at the end of the sentence. Here, the end of the sentence verb is 갔다. Just like with verbs, if the final letter or verb/adjective stem is a vowel, 아따 or 오따 can be merged. So 비쌌다, 잘생겼다, 뚱뚱했다, that person was fat. 뚱뚱하 plus 였다 becomes 했다. We talked about this already. I don't want to confuse you even more. And I don't want this lesson to be too long. Future tense. Conjugating adjectives in the future tense is the same as conjugating verbs into the future tense. All you need to do is add 겠다 to the stem. So exactly the same. Basically, the moral of the story, adjectives and verbs conjugate exactly the same except in present tense. In present tense, adjectives are really easy. You don't do anything. In verbs, you either add 는다 or 니은타. And that's it. So 배고프겠다, 맛있겠다, 행복하겠다. In general, not only is this basic form rare in conversation, but Korean people do not use adjectives in the future tense as often as English speakers. Very true. Another summary table, and then conjugating 있다 and 있다, right? Because we said 있다 can have two meanings. One of the most complex and versatile words in Korean. Unfortunately, it is also one of the most common words. It is often very difficult for learners of a language to fully understand some of the most commonly used words in whatever language they're studying. For example, a native English speaker might think that the word the is one of the easiest words. No, it's not, because it's very frequently used. However, trying to explain the purpose and usages of the to a Korean person is not easy. You will quickly discover that the usage is very complex. 있다 can be an adjective or it can be a verb. Whether it's an adjective or a verb depends on its usage. 있다 is an adjective when it's used to indicate that one has something. So I have a pen, which we learned in lesson 2. 나는 펜이 있다. 나는 차가 있다. 나는 가방이 있다. I have a bag, I have a car, I have a pen. In this case, it's an adjective. Because it's considered an adjective, we follow the rule of conjugation. In the present tense, it stays exactly the same, since this is present tense, right? So these three sentences are awesome. They're correct. When 있다 is used to indicate that something is at a location or in a location, it's also an adjective. This is also very difficult for English speakers to understand. I never thought about it, so yeah, I didn't have any difficulty understanding. I was just like, okay, that's true. Move on. 나는 은행 안에 있다. I am inside the bank. 개는 집 안에 있다. The dog is in the house. 고양이는 의자 밑에 있다. The cat is under the chair. Again, this usage of 있다 is an adjective, so in the present tense, you wouldn't change any of the conjugation. So they're conjugated already into the plain form. However, the usage of 있다 is much more complex than just these two meanings. 있다 has many usages. In fact, there are times when 있다 is considered a verb. At this point, your understanding of Korean is not strong enough to see examples of 있다 as a verb. because you haven't learned a lot of the critical principles that we need. What I want you to take from is that itta can be a verb, and thus it can sometimes be conjugated as a verb. Therefore, although the example sentences above with itta are properly conjugated, there are times when the proper conjugation of itta in the plain form would be 있는다. Itta is considered a verb when a person or animal is not only at a thing but staying at a location or in a state for a period of time. The difference between the adjective itta to indicate that someone's somewhere in a location and the verb itta to indicate that someone stays in a location or in a state is confusing. I never felt like it was confusing, but if he says so, I believe him, because, yeah. Below are some complicated ways itta can be used as a verb. You absolutely do not need to understand these now. I would recommend actually you don't understand these now, because, like this one, like, yeah, just don't look at it for now. Ko itta, sure, maybe. When telling somebody to stay in a location, yeah. When using ta to make a suggestion to stay in a place, don't worry about them. Just know that it's an adjective, but sometime in the future we're going to learn how to use, sorry, I didn't mean to hit the mic, but sometime we're going to learn how to use it as a verb. That's a lot of grammar, very long lesson, 36 minutes and counting, but hopefully you understood TLDR. We learned how to conjugate verbs and adjectives. Adjectives and verbs conjugate exactly the same, except in present tense. Present tense, you need to know that adjectives, don't need to worry about them. Verbs are a little bit different. That's it. You can go over the lesson. You can go over, oh, do I add atta or otta? You can do all that stuff. But guess what? You're going to experience it so many times that it's just going to come naturally to you. I didn't remember the rules until I had to look at them, because I just do them at this point. Kind of like you don't know the rules of when to change. You don't have to think about whether you use most, like most beautiful, or smarter, adding er, or smartest. You just kind of know it. It's kind of the same thing in Korean. You're just going to know it. I know now it's going to sound like that's a long time in the future, but just know that slow and steady wins the race. Take it one step at a time. Get a lot of content, because that's what's really going to help you. So if you're into K-dramas or varieties, try to spend maybe 10 or 15 minutes a day, or whenever you end up watching, not using any subtitles. If you want, you can use Korean subtitles, but at this point I'm assuming your reading isn't that good, so you'd probably be pausing a lot to just read, and you probably wouldn't understand it anyways, and the whole point is just to understand via body language or context. So that'll give you a lot of input, and you'll slowly start hearing these things. And once you hear this thing, you might not recognize it, but once you think about, oh, do I conjugate kada as katta or kaotta, like you're not sure, in your memory, your brain's gonna process that and be like, oh, I heard in that one drama. You might not even know where you heard it, but you'll just know that you heard katta a lot more, so you'll know that it's katta. Hopefully that makes sense. If not, you can leave a comment and I'll try to explain it a bit more properly. But that's it for this lesson.